The city of Sofia, Bulgaria, is a place where history and religion intertwine. With its stunning Orthodox cathedrals and cobbled streets, it has witnessed multiple tales of faith, devotion, and often tragedy. In this city, a dark and tragic story unfolds at the heart of a community where trust is paramount and family ties are sacred. Here, a priest, his partner, a devoted wife and her husband become protagonists of a tale that blurs the lines between love, faith, and betrayal. The priest, Father Nikolai, was a man of about 40 years old, of average height and with a presence that inspired respect. He had dark brown hair, with some gray beginning to appear, and piercing green eyes that reflected his deep spirituality. His voice was calm and comforting, and he was known for his ability to guide his parishioners in times of crisis. He was often seen in church, where he would spend hours preparing his sermons or hearing confessions, always dressed in his black cassock, a symbol of his devotion to God. Father Evans, his fellow priest, was a younger man, in his 30s, with a more outgoing and charismatic character. He had wavy blonde hair, fair skin, and was always smiling, which attracted many parishioners to him. In contrast to Father Nikolai's seriousness, Father Evans was a man who enjoyed socializing after services, a true community entertainer, always surrounded by people and giving free rein to his joyful spirit. The devoted wife, Anya, was a 35-year-old woman of subtle beauty and an air of fragility. She had long, straight hair, a light brown hue that shone in the sun, and her blue eyes were deep roots of sadness and melancholy. Anya was a woman who had dedicated her life to the church and to caring for her husband, Ivan, a robust, strong-willed 38-year-old man. Ivan was a metalworker, with calloused hands that spoke of hard work and a heart that had always put his wife and family first. He had short, dark hair, with a well-groomed beard that gave him an air of wisdom. Nikolai and Father Evans' routine revolved around Sunday services and daily church activities. Sunday masses were the highlight of the week, where all the parishioners gathered to pray and receive the message of God's Word. Anya was always among those in attendance, sitting in the front row, her face serene and focused as she listened intently to Nikolai's homilies, full of wisdom and compassion. The relationship between Anya and her husband Ivan was complicated. Although they loved each other, there was constant pressure on both of them due to family and societal expectations. Ivan was jealous of Anya's devotion to the church, often feeling that she spent more time with the priests than with him. This discontent was most evident in the conversations they had at home. "Why do you spend so much time in church, Anya?" he would often ask her, his voice filled with frustration. "I am your husband, not a shadow in your life," he would add, though he always belonged to the community. Anya would try to explain the importance of her faith, but Ivan could not help but feel left out and unappreciated. Meanwhile, Father Nikolai watched the couple's life from a respectful distance. He had developed a special interest in Anya, not just for her beauty, but for her sincerity and the light she seemed to radiate amidst the gloom. He became a pillar of support for her, offering advice and comfort in difficult times, and he would often stay and chat with her after Mass, sharing life notes and anecdotes from church history. One evening, as they were decorating the church together for a celebration, Nikolai remembered an old tale he had heard from his grandfather about faith and perseverance. With a wistful smile, he began to tell the story, capturing Anya's attention in a way that they both felt went beyond simple friendship. It was as if something inexplicable began to form between them, an invisible thread that tied them together in a connection they barely understood. Weeks turned into months, and Father Nikolai's attention toward Anya intensified. She enjoyed his company and soon realized there was more than just camaraderie between them. The way he looked at her, with a mixture of respect and hidden desire, began to disrupt the order of her thoughts and emotions. One day, as they talked in the church garden, Nikolai took her hand, a gesture that sent shivers through her body. "Anya, there's something I want to tell you," he said. But before she could continue, they realized they were being watched by Father Evans, who had just emerged from the vestry. Father Evans, with his inquisitive nature, sensed something in the air. Sensing the tension, he decided to confront Nikolai. "What was going on there? The relationship between you and Anya has changed. You should be careful, brother," he warned in a serious tone. Although Nikolai laughed and dismissed the comment, the seed of doubt had been planted. As time went by, Anya and Nikolai realized the true feelings that were beginning to blossom between them, but they didn't know how to deal with it. The masses continued, and their meetings became more frequent, often stealing moments alone in the cathedral after everyone else had left. In those moments, they felt free, revealing themselves to each other with an honesty that was unusual for them. One evening, After a mass attended by a large group of parishioners, Anya felt especially connected to Nikolai. As they lit candles and the soft light of the flames danced in the air, they confronted their feelings. It was at that moment that, carried away by passion and desire, they kissed, sealing a pact of forbidden love under the silent gaze of God. The emotional and spiritual connection, however, quickly turned into something physical. They realized that they had crossed a line that should never have been crossed. Thus began a secret relationship within the temple of God, a place that was meant to be sacred to them. Masses became furtive encounters. They met in the confessional, where they slipped between shadows and secrets. Inside the cathedral, the echo of their whispers competed with the singing of the church choirs. The devotion that once existed between them transformed into a desperate search for a deeper connection, completely forgetting the warnings of their reason, their faith, and much more so their ethics. What had started as simple affection for each other had transformed into the representation of everything they should never have allowed it to be. Tragedy lay in wait, waiting for its next move. The days continued to flow in a spiral of discreet encounters between Anya and Father Nikolai. The church, which had once been just a place of worship, became the scene of a forbidden passion, where devotion was transformed into a game of seduction. The community continued with its routines, oblivious to the emotional whirlwind that was developing inside their temple. The decisive moment came on a spring evening, when the scent of fresh flowers filled the air. Anya had stayed in the church to help Father Nikolai clean up after Massachusetts. The evening shadows fell softly across the altar as Father Nikolai arranged the flowers. Suddenly, they looked at each other, and the weight of the tension between them became almost unbearable. "Anya, we need to talk," Nikolai said, his voice shaking. She felt her heart pound and uneasiness take hold. The priest stepped closer, his expressiveness betraying the strong attraction they felt for each other. They found themselves closer than ever, and that proximity ignited a spark that led to a stolen kiss. Urgency and desire flowed unchecked, as if the same air charged with tension was pushing them together. In that atmosphere charged with devotion and forbidden love, they gave themselves to each other, feeling the outside world fade away. Despite their damage, the thrill of their encounters felt like a liberation, an unspoken truth finally becoming tangible. They fell into a spiral of desire, unable to resist. So what began as a moment of vulnerability quickly escalated into increasingly risky situations. Anya and Nikolai began to seek out spaces in the church where they could be alone. Every corner of the church became a place for their secret encounters. The stories of forbidden love they used to hear in the church halls came to life at the end of each service, transforming faith and guilt into danger and passion. The practices of confession in the church began to seem more like a refuge from her longings than a time of seeking forgiveness. On one occasion, while Father Evans was in the vestibule lecturing on morality with some of the faithful, Anya made her way to the confessional, where she found Nikolai waiting for her in the dim light. The beating of their hearts echoed in the stillness of the small space. "It is a sin, Nikolai," Anya said in a whisper, her voice cracking with emotion. Yet the temptation was too strong. They gave in to passion, caught between the addiction of the forbidden and repentance. They knew that every encounter represented a risk, not only from the eyes of God watching them, but also from the judgment of their own community and the repercussions that the revelation of their affair would have on their families and their faith. A cold sweat ran down their backs as they imagined the scandal that could arise if anyone found out. Father Evans, being a perceptive man, began to notice the change in Father Nikolai's attitude. Their gazes became more intense each time they met in church. Along with Anya's dedication to her duties, the illusion of a union between the two was becoming more and more evident. In a casual chat between priests after a service, Father Evans asked him wryly, "Have you noticed that Anya seems to be more radiant lately? I always see you around her, brother. You should not let that devotion cloud your reason." Nikolai just smiled and turned the conversation away. However, inside, a storm of emotions was fighting in his mind. The connection with Anya was irrepressible and would grow like an uncontrolled flame. He had a feeling that the situation was getting out of his hands, and the shadow of an inevitable outcome was looming over them. The real trouble began when Anya noticed changes in her relationship with her husband, Ivan. Every time he came home after a long day at work, he seemed more distant and worried, as if something was bothering him. Anya's protective instincts led her to ask him about what was wrong, but Ivan always steered the subject away. "I'm just tired of work, Anya," he said, his voice strained. Yet Anya couldn't help but feel that the tension in the household was growing. Her furtive encounters with Nikolai became a refuge that only multiplied her anguish. Guilt became her constant companion, as her life was a reflection of two worlds that were never meant to meet. One evening, as Nikolai and Anya tried to reunite, they were faced with an untenable situation. "We need to be careful," Nikolai told her. "If Ivan finds out, we could ruin not only our lives, but also the lives of those we love." Anya, with tears in her eyes, nodded, feeling the weight of the dilemma fall on her shoulders. The relationship began to deteriorate. The clandestine encounters, once full of impetus and desire, turned into moments of doubt and restlessness. In a moment of courage, Anya proposed an escape. "If this isn't right, maybe we should leave everything behind and move in together. Maybe that's what God wants." Nikolai felt a chill run down his spine. The priest's wisdom whispered to him that this was not the solution. However, the desire to be together overcame his reason. "Maybe, just for a while, we can find a place where we can be truly happy," he replied, fighting the feelings that assailed him. But their relationship did not last long in the Garden of Shadows. Father Evans, increasingly uneasy about his friend's attitudes, made the decision to follow him in an attempt to protect the virtue of the church. One evening, he decided that he must confront Nikolai, seeking answers that could save him from dishonor. Arriving at the church, she headed to the small garden where Nikolai had promised to meet Anya. However, she found the scene she would never have wanted to be in. Nikolai and Anya, wrapped in a passionate embrace. The tension in the church was palpable. The storm raged outside, reflecting the emotional turmoil raging inside. Anya and Nikolai found themselves wrapped up in their emotions, as the decisions they had made began to have devastating consequences. As the days passed, Anya and Nikolai's relationship became more strained. Although they tried to continue their clandestine encounters, the weight of guilt and fear of being discovered began to wear them down. Anya's anxious look as she left the house and her growing anxiety accentuated the pressure of forbidden love. Father Evans, aware of the furtive glances between them, felt a growing uneasiness. In a conversation with Nikolai, he warned him, "You are not being yourself, brother. You should walk away from this before it is too late." Nikolai, tormented by the conflict between his duty and his love, looked away, unable to accept the truth Evans was trying to point out to him. That stormy night, Ivan, uneasy about the growing rumors about Anya and the priest, decided to confront her. Arriving at the church, he found Anya alone, deep in thought, which unleashed a torrent of emotions. "Is it true what they say? That you are with Nikolai?" he asked in a trembling voice. Anya, caught between passion and fear, had no choice but to confess. Ivan, he's not what he seems. What I feel for him is... it's real." Ivan's face twisted into a mix of anger and despair. "You don't understand. You've become a stranger. You're not the same anymore." The intensity of his emotion filled the room. As the argument escalated, Ivan decided to leave to find Nikolai. His mind was filled with resentment and pain, unable to accept Anya's betrayal. Like a whirlwind, he charged into the dark night, driven by the desire for revenge. As she reached the church, the echo of her anguish resonated in her mind. She entered unannounced and found Nikolai, who was deep in prayer. "Nikolai," she cried, breaking the sacred silence. "What have you done? You have ruined my life." Nikolai turned around in surprise, fear flooding his face as he saw Ivan holding a knife. "Enough, Ivan. There is no reason for this," he tried to reason. But Ivan's fury was unleashed, fueled by the storm outside. "You've taken everything from me. I can't let this continue," he shouted, taking a step forward. In an attempt to protect himself, Nikolai raised his hands. "I don't want to fight you," he said. However, like a shadow emerging from the chaos, Ivan lunged at him. The knife flashed in the gloom just as Anya, hearing the commotion, entered the church. The scene was heartbreaking. Nikolai and Ivan were locked in confrontation, each fighting to reclaim what they considered theirs. "Stop!" Anya screamed, her voice piercing the tense air. Anya's scream was in vain. In a tragic, thoughtless instant, the knife found its way to Nikolai. A heart-wrenching scream left his lips as the impact pushed him backwards, falling to the ground with a look of pain and shock in his eyes, as if he couldn't believe what had happened. Anya ran to him, tears streaming down her face. "Nikolai! No, please," she pleaded, watching the life rapidly ebb away from her beloved. The words caught, and anguish filled the space between them. As Nikolai lay on the ground, Anya's world began to crumble. She looked at Ivan, who, still stunned by what had happened, didn't know how to react. "This is your fault," she screamed. But madness began to take over her mind. Why did you do it?" she reproached Ivan, rage and desperation mixing in her voice. "It was our love, the only one that could save us." But in her heart, Anya realized, for the first time, the emptiness she had been ignoring. Reality was blurring and her madness was beginning to reveal itself. Ivan tried, but Anya cut him off. "No. I don't understand why you can't understand that this was supposed to happen. He was the only one who understood me." Chaos reigned over the scene. Nikolai, struggling to breathe, looked at Anya, who was beside herself. "I love you, Anya. I will always love you," he murmured, his voice weakening. But Anya's storm of emotions culminated in a heart-wrenching cry, like the lament of a lost soul. Nikolai's life faded away. Anya realized that her madness had crossed all lines. She looked at Ivan, who was paralyzed, realizing that all her fury and despair had caused the death of the man she loved. A deathly silence filled the church, witnessing the devastation that betrayal and violence had left behind. With each last heartbeat, Nikolai closed his eyes, taking love and hope with him. Anya, overcome with madness, began to laugh through her tears. "You don't understand, do you, Ivan? He will never leave me. He will always be here," she cried, pointing to her heart, though her mind was crumbling into a dark fog. Ivan realized that everything had gone too far. The church, once full of light and hope, had become a temple of pain, where love had been devoured by hatred and madness. From that fateful night on, Anya was trapped in a cycle of madness and despair, unable to accept the death of Nikolai, who had been her only salvation. Ivan was left trapped in his guilt, a man scarred by what he had done, facing the devastating loss of the love of his life. The story of Father Nikolai and Anya became a tragic echo within the walls of the church, becoming a warning about forbidden love and the madness that can be unleashed when boundaries are crossed. The night of tragedy would continue to resonate in the community, a reminder that love, when confused with obsession and madness, can lead to destruction. Years passed since that fateful night when Nikolai's life snuffed out and Anya's mind fell apart. The small church, once vibrant with singing and prayers, had become a forgotten place, where shadows crawled along the walls and the echo of happy laughter had faded. The village, still scarred by the tragedy, remembered Nikolai not only as a man of faith and love, but as the victim of a love that turned dark and tragic. Anya, trapped in her madness, had been taken to an asylum where she was admitted for treatment. The doctors, at first, did not understand the depth of her pain. Her psyche had fractured after the loss of Nikolai, transforming her love into a dangerous obsession. She spent her days in a state of delirium, talking to the shadow of her lover, convinced that he was still watching her. Her world was a labyrinth of distorted memories and ghosts, where reality and madness danced together in a macabre waltz. In the village, Ivan became a living ghost of himself. Guilt haunted him with a corrosive intensity. With each dawn, his mind returned to that fateful encounter in the church, where his uncontrollable rage had destroyed everything he held dear. He tried to find redemption by helping others, but every smile on his neighbors' faces only reminded him of what he had lost. The nights were filled with sleeplessness and nightmares. Echoes of Anya and Nikolai resonated in his head, making him a prisoner of his own guilt. Father Evans, who had tried to divert the course of the tragedy, dedicated his life to helping those affected. Despite bearing the responsibility of not being able to stop what happened, he found solace in his work, trying to give hope to others. However, every Mass he officiated was a reminder of the pain his congregation had gone through. As time passed, the story of Nikolai, Anya, and Ivan became a dark legend, a reminder of the consequences of unrequited love and madness. Future generations would hear the tale, wondering how a simple love could lead to the destruction of so many lives. In this community, love had proven to be both a beacon and an abyss, and in its painful memory lay the lessons that life often forgot to teach. The church, though in ruins, would continue to stand as a symbol of what once was, and what it should never be again.